Hello, lovely listeners. It is the Fair Job Network podcast here, and I'm Richard Palmer. No Steve today. Steve is up to his ears as a candidate in the UK elections. We're having some elections over here at the moment, which you may or may not be aware of. And Steve is standing for Parliament, so he's a bit busy at the moment, down in London, knocking on doors, having dogs set on him and eggs thrown at him, no doubt. Anyway, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the subject of today's podcast, which is to look at what happened in Britain this week when the Edinburgh International Book Festival had its sponsor boycotted and cancelled by activist groups. Now, this has some very interesting implications for not only how the arts are funded in Britain, but also interesting implications as to how ESG, so that's environmental, social responsibility and governance, is impacted in the investment funds. So how ESG investment funds will be impacted by this. It's almost like the corporate world has just woken up to the fact that they'll never make friends with the activists. Therefore, what's the point? Anyway, before we get into this, I just wanted to say a warm welcome. You can follow us in the blurb below. Sorry, there's no links working there. We have some challenges with YouTube at the moment. They don't like giving you links and things without verifications, and the verification process isn't exactly straightforward. It's a bit of a learning curve for all. Good news is I do have a new camera. The bad news is I've not been able to get it to work with the podcasting software yet. So hopefully that'll be up and running fairly soon. The lighting's a bit better though, because we invested in a light, and I think the microphone seems to be working quite well as well. Anyway, without further ado, let's kick on. If you can like and subscribe this, if you like the content of what you're hearing, I'd be very grateful. And also, if you are interested in more information about this sort of subject and how the culture that we live in, highly politicized, highly divided, and highly ideologically driven, impacts the workplace, especially smaller employers, and also how it impacts normal people's lives, then, do follow us, because this is what we talk about most of the time. And particularly if you are working in, managing in, or run a business or employ people, you probably want to follow us. Steve and I have got a long careers. We've both been in this racket for 30 years. Although I look 30 and Steve looks 60, we're about similar age. And I've obviously just been a cleaner living. We've got a lot of experience with this sort of thing, and we've seen just about every single scenario that you'll come across in the workplace, having both worked in management and human resources for a long time now. So if you do run your own business, if you are an employer, follow us, and you may also want to consider joining the Fair Job Initiative, which is designed to help your business manage the risks of employing people in such a divided society. Anyway, without further ado, I want to kick on today. And today I'm going to talk about a situation that's happened this week. Now, basically, every year in the UK around the summertime, we've got a number of book festivals, and these are quite big events. They're quite famous. The three most famous are one that happens in Hay-on-Wye, down in the Welsh Marshes. There's one that happens in Wigton, which is just in southwest Scotland. And then there's the Edinburgh International Book Festival, which is a pretty large book festival, which happens at the same time as the Edinburgh International Festival, which, of course, as you may well be aware, is the world's largest arts festival and culture festival. So now, like lots of these events around the world, these festivals are funded in a number of ways, and part of that funding comes from the corporate world. And in Edinburgh, Edinburgh has been a centre of finance and of commerce for many, many years. The whole idea of life insurance was pretty much invented in Edinburgh. So Excuse me, just have a swig of tea. So, yeah, the whole idea of life assurance was pretty much invented in Edinburgh. This created a great deal of capital that needed to be invested. And as a result, Edinburgh has a pretty large financial services sector, an investment sector for a city of its size. Now, one of the investment houses in Edinburgh is a company called Baillie Gifford. And Baillie Gifford had been around for as long as I can remember. Probably I don't know exactly when, but we can look it up. But they're about as establishment as you can get in Edinburgh. They really are a very successful business. Been operating for a very long time. Baillie Gifford are an investment company, and they manage funds. Now, like every other fund management company around the world, they have been getting quite heavily involved in making ESG, that's environment, social responsibility and governance, part of their fund strategy. So just to run through what that means for lay people. If you are a big company and you want, let's say you're Walmart, and you want to raise some investment from investment funds, then you would contact the fund managers like Baillie Gifford and indicate that you're looking for investment. And Baillie Gifford would then sell your business to their customers, who are organizations like pension funds who are looking to invest in long-term businesses, and also insurance, obviously, because the Edinburgh is obviously a big insurance centre. So ESG funds are started to emerge about 20 years ago, when the idea of ethical investment started to emerge. So back then it would be, we are not going to invest money in tobacco, in alcohol, in arms, in companies that pollute or activities that pollute. And over the years, like all these things, more stuff got added to that. So your carbon emissions would be added to it. So we're not going to invest money in companies that aren't carbon neutral or aren't making an effort to be carbon neutral. And then you can add other social justice elements to that, like Black Lives Matter, like the gender dysphoria debate. And before you know it, you've got a list of what can loosely be described as woke policies that in order to secure investment from one of these funds, your company must subscribe to. Okay? Now, you maybe have heard of the World Economic Forum's ESG scores, and that's because the World Economic Forum, previously run by James Bond villain Klaus Schwab, was one of the organizations who used to keep ESG scores on various corporates. So you could, if you were a corporate, you could apply to the WEF who would come and audit your business for their ESG score. And they would say, oh yes, they score a 50 out of 60 or the ESG or whatever. I don't know how the scoring mechanism worked. And then that would then put you above Tesco's. Let's say if you're Walmart, it would put you above Tesco, or put you somewhere on the corporate ladder. So by improving your ESG score, not only could you access larger amounts of investment and more investment, but you also get investment at more favorable rates than an organization which would have a low ESG score. So you can see how this system could be easily abused by individuals wishing to promote highly political and ideological ideas into society. And you're probably fed up of me talking about this. Hold on, I should have another swig of tea. Because I've said it several times. And that is that it's all very well talking about the culture war and the consequences of it, which we do at length. We all follow YouTube channels, we all read blogs, etc. But we must understand that the actual front line is in the world of commerce and in the world of work, because it's in these two areas where the distribution of money can be linked to the adoption of ideologies. which means that ideologies can be forced on you through threat of investment, through threat of maintenance of services like banking or credit cards. We've seen that a few times with organizations like, for instance, a Free Speech Union had their PayPal accounts removed. And it wasn't until it was challenged in the British Parliament that PayPal began U-turned on that and restored the Free Speech Union's PayPal services. We've seen individuals and organisations across the UK cancelled from their banks and unable to obtain banking services. And it's all quite nefarious because private organisations who are doing this don't need to justify why they're doing it. They can claim commercial confidentiality. Well, it does seem that there's a fairly large ideological motivation behind this, and that ideological motivation is maintaining ESG scores. So it doesn't really matter what organizations do or what we do as a society unless we can actually start to address the problem of ESG and the problem and how ESG is forced onto businesses through these investment funds. Now, something else to add on this is that if I'm Walmart and I've applied for this loan or this investment from the investment company from an ESG fund, then usually as part of the stipulation, I'm obliged to drive the ESG policies down through my supply chain. So I might contact the Edinburgh Paperclip Emporium and say, okay, Edinburgh Paperclip Emporium, if you want to keep selling paperclips to Walmart Group, I am going to have to require you to adhere to our ESG policies. And part of that is our equality, diversity, and inclusion policies. And part of that is we want you to have the following policies in your organization. And some of those policies might be fairly radical. Okay? So this is how small businesses find themselves getting caught up in having to implement political ideologies on their members of staff. This is how it happens. So what I'm going to do now is just run through an article that I wrote today and was published in the Daily Skeptic. And it's commenting on the situation with Baillie Gifford and the Edinburgh International Book Festival. And you'll see why it's important and why it might have some interesting consequences for EDI and ESG moving forward. So the article is entitled, The EDI Revolution is Eating Its Own and Companies Have Noticed. I'll just have another swig of tea, excuse me. Very unprofessional, but it's New Year's. This is the beginning of the end of the ESG, Environmental, Social and Governance Fund. The cancellation of Baillie Gifford as sponsors to the Edinburgh International Book Festival may indicate so. Behind all the election brouhaha in the UK this week, those of you keeping up with the news may be aware that there's trouble at Mill in the Edinburgh International Book Festival and at the Hay Book Festival last week, where activists have forced the festival to drop one of its sponsors. In the sense that the festivals are being sponsored in part by Baillie Gifford, the Edinburgh-based fund managers, an organisation called Free Fossil Books has put intense pressure on the festival organisers to cancel the Baillie Gifford sponsorship. The activists had bullied the Hay Festival to comply earlier this month, and predictably Charlotte Church and Nish Kumar both withdrew from the Hay Festival in protest of the partnership. And another 900 publishers, journalists and writers signed an open letter demanding the sponsorship deal be ended. Baillie Gifford is to be dropped because it invests in oil, and it also does business with Israel. We call on financial institutions with holdings in Israeli occupation, apartheid and genocide to divest, the activists screeched. They also appeared to object to authors who sell through Amazon, as Amazon operates in Israel, and also Facebook for the same reason. Now, sadly, the organisers feel they have no option but to submit to the radicals' demands. Given the tone of their response, the Edinburgh organisers have been quite blunt as to why they feel they've been forced into this. This seems to be backfiring on the activists, although, of course, they are yet to realise this, Alan Little, chairman of the Edinburgh Book Festival, was reported by the BBC to say, Jenny Niven, the CEO of the festival, didn't pull her punches in expressing her frustration. The pressure on our team has been simply intolerable. We've had a major global festival starting in 10 weeks' time, and we need to focus all our efforts and energy on delivering a safe and successful event for our audiences. Undermining the long-term future of charitable organisations such as book festivals is not the right way to bring around change. Now, those of us plugged into the debate happening within the corporate world are raising an eyebrow at this. You see, as I discussed in an article in the Daily Sceptic last week, environment, social responsibility and governance policies are being forced on small to medium businesses through the corporate supply chain. Ergo, as a corporate wants to raise investment, it is offered money by a fund that requires it demonstrate a high ESG score to secure that investment. In order to secure a high score, and thus the investment, one of the requirements is to demand that their suppliers, i.e. the supply chain, are fully compliant with the investees' ESG policies. Now, what are these ESG policies? Well, some of them are pretty radical. For example, I found out this week that a major high street banking group, who will remain nameless, came within a hair's breadth of enforcing a procurement policy down its supply chain which would have required all its suppliers to agree to enforce radical gender ideology in their workplaces. The only reason why this was thwarted was the diligence of some of their employees who, securing opinion from their employment lawyers, indicated that the policy would have put the company at risk of breaching the Equality Act 2010. How on earth had its procurement department come so close to acting unlawfully? Well, with a directive to promote ESG, it listened to its LGBTQ+ employee advocacy group, who demanded it. With the support of external activists, and the procurement department signed it off, without checking any alternative option within or outside the organisation. That's the thing about ESG and its offspring, equality, diversity, and inclusion, EDI or DEI. There is an increasing evidence in reports this year that EDI, when done badly and on the cheap, causes huge damage to employers through the workforce disengagement, isolation of some employees for holding the wrong views, and employee turnover, both through resignations and sadly through sackings. Members of this parish will be aware of the situation, and you can read more here in an article I wrote in April. Now, we know that 62% of British workers work in SMEs, that's employers under 250 employees. We also know that from the Free Speech Union's report, quoted in the same article, that 65% of British employees have had some sort of EDI training in their current job or the last. I've worked in and with SMEs for decades, and some SMEs never spend any money or time on training unless it's absolutely necessary. So why do these figures indicate that SMEs are spending money on EDI training? The answer is because their clients demand it. You want to sell paperclips to a bank or an NHS trust? Well, you better have an EDI policy, and you better be able to demonstrate you've trained your people in it. So, to box tick, SMEs buy the first EDI training they come across that won't break the bank. And these are of very dubious quality. Some are literally copies of American training riddled with critical race theory, which has no relevance whatsoever to the history of race relations in the UK. We also know, from the Free Speech Union report mentioned above, that the results of this EDI training have been catastrophic. You see, while a high street bank could make such an error in its rush to raise its ESG ratings and damage itself in the process, for an SME, such damage can be existential. So SMEs are between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, they know they need to play ball with EDI to win contracts, and there's plenty of evidence that the requirements of those procurement policies can be radical to the point of unlawful. See above. And on the other hand, they have been doing this without destroying their employee engagement and productivity, or implement a policy that may be unlawful. Sorry, I'll repeat that sentence. On the other hand, they have to do this without destroying their employee engagement and productivity, or implementing a policy that may be unlawful. This dichotomy is why we set up the Fair Job Initiative, to support SMEs caught in this trap. So, what has all this got to do with Baillie Gifford and the Edinburgh Book Festival? Well, Baillie Gifford is one of the fund managers who are heavily invested in pushing ESG In fact, it's core to their strategy if you check their website. This quote from Nick Thomas, a partner, as reported by the BBC in response to the boycott. Our collaboration with the Edinburgh International Book Festival, spanning decades, was rooted in our shared interest in making Edinburgh a thriving and culturally vibrant place to live and work. He said the film has supported schools and children's programs providing free books, and he defended Baillie Gifford's ethical record. The assertion that we have significant amounts of money in the occupied Palestinian territories is offensively misleading. Baillie Gifford is a large investor in several multinational technology companies, including Amazon, Nvidia, and Meta, he said. Demanding divestment from these global companies, used by millions of people around the world, is unreasonable and serves no purpose, much as it would be unreasonable to demand authors boycott Instagram or stop selling books on Amazon. Nor is Baillie Gifford a significant fossil fuel investor. Only 2% of our clients' money is invested in companies with some business related to fossil fuels. We invest far more in companies helping drive the transition to clean energy. You can hear the frustration in Nick's voice. How much more woke can we realistically be? The thing is that Nick and the fund are finding out that the answer is it will never be woke enough. It is learning, as Google did back in March when it fired over 50 employees for occupying its C-suite floor and demanding the company break off ties with Israel, that engaging with activists through initiatives like ESG is akin to holding a tiger by the tail. Indeed, at a time when the market seems to be turning against ESG funds, is this incident the fund management's industry Google moment? Bloomberg writer Merrin Somerset Webb has asked this question in her superb Substack article this week. I'll put the link below in the notes. On this issue here, why anti-Baillie Gifford grandstanding does much more harm than good, which I do urge you to read because she provides ample evidence that so far there is no evidence that going big on ESG and DEI policies is of any use when it comes to investment returns. So if there's no evidence that ESG/EDI policies make any returns, then what are the benefits to investing in one? Why would you offer such a fund to the pension funds and others who need a return on investment? Again, Merrin sums up brilliantly. If we are to live in a world where no good deed goes unpunished, what's the point? ESG and DEI policies are already falling by the wayside at speed. This kind of thing only hurries it up. Not everyone will mind that, but I'm pretty sure it's not what these activists had in mind. So for us at the Fair Job Initiative, who are seeing firsthand the potentially serious consequences of ESG funds and SMEs, this actually comes as good news because perhaps now the fund managers will stop selling ESG-focused funds and perhaps their investees will cease demanding that our clients jump through EDI hoops for their supper. I am pessimistic, however. This might be a chink of light, but in the meantime, it's going to be business as usual for us for a long time. So that's the article that's published today. If you have any comments, then please add them below. You can also read the article on my Substack and also at the Daily Skeptic, and I'll leave a link to that article in the notes as well. In the meantime, I'm going to wrap up for today, and we have a very interesting interview with Barry Wall from Warrior Teachers, which will be coming out this evening, I think. And as always, we're doing a big push to really up the ante with some valuable content, particularly for those of you out there who are in the business of employing some people. Anyway, if you liked what you heard today, please subscribe and tick like. I'd be very, very grateful, and you can even press that bell button if you want to on your YouTube. In the meantime, you can also find us on Locals, and you can find us on Spotify, and we're also on LinkedIn. If you do run a business and you are interested in the services that the Fair Job Initiative can supply to you, then please visit www.fairjob.co.uk. That's www.fairjob.co.uk. Or alternatively, you can email me at contact@fairjob.co.uk. That's contact@fairjob.co.uk. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the day.